Welcome to Into the Storm Leaders, the no BS podcast that ignites leadership potential and sparks innovation in the ever-evolving business landscape we all work in. I'm Joe Jurek, your host and catalyst for growth, joined by my co-host and Culture Shock senior coach, Pete Hansberger. Together, we embark on a journey to uncover the strategies, mindsets, and actions that drive truly exceptional leadership and winning culture. Whether you're an emerging leader looking to level up in your career or an accomplished executive seeking fresh perspectives, join us as we uncover inspiring stories and thought-provoking insights from proven leaders and share practical takeaways that enable courageous leadership. Get ready to charge into the storm and become a catalyst for better workplace culture. Folks, welcome back to another episode of Into the Storm Leaders podcast. I'm excited to introduce you today to Darby Walsh from Delta Business Strategies. We've had the pleasure at Culture Shock of working with Darby directly over the past few months to establish better follow through, get consistency in some of our own internal processes. While yes, we're facilitators, we see the benefit in having an objective outside facilitator help us through things as well. And that takes us to Darby. Darby, you want to say hi?
Yeah. Hi, Joe. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the being here and being able to talk about the exciting world of processes and workflows and process optimization.
Hell yeah. Before we got started, you were saying this is, I hope talking all about process isn't going to be the most boring podcast in the world. It's like quite contrary. There is some excitement that comes with a really well-formed process. At least I imagine some of our listeners feel that way because they've probably suffered the slings and arrows of broken processes or not fully formed processes in their business. And we're going to open that up, pull as much wisdom and expertise out of your brain for our listeners today about establishing process and all that you do with your clients at Delta Business Strategies, but also talk about your journey, military background, as I understand.
Yep.
I want to get into EOS, want to get into unique ability, Colby. There is a whole bunch for us to cover today, but why don't we start kind of with your start? Take us through the journey a little bit. Tell us, we're in Ohio now. Are you from Ohio? How did we get to from where you started to where we are today?
Yep. Sure. So, it's quite a journey that I've had. I went to college, just like a lot of other folks, but got very disenchanted, just very bored, couldn't sit still, wasn't learning anything, and left college my junior year.
Okay. Where'd you go?
Allegheny College. It's in Meadville, Pennsylvania. So I think one of your previous guests was Meadville.
Rob Smith of Accutech is on the board for Allegheny College.
That was a great episode. Great episode. But yeah, I went to Allegheny College in Meadville, Pennsylvania. Awesome. And decided one day that I'd kind of had enough. I'm tired of wasting my money and my parents' money, and joined the Marine Corps. My friends weren't very happy with me. They wanted me to choose an easier path. Couldn't understand why I was joining the Marines, and I said, well, it's the hardest branch, and why would I not? And I was just looking for adventure. I needed to get out, needed to go do something that was cool and fun, and joined, with the full intention of being in the infantry. My recruiter yelled at me because I could have had any job that pretty high ASVAB score and blah, blah, blah. But joined the infantry and got to travel all around the world. I've been a lot of different places.
Wow.
After the Marines, got out and just kind of had some jobs. I was a construction inspector in Richmond, Virginia. It's kind of a job that I stumbled into.
Sure. Did you relocate to Richmond, or when you got out of the Marine Corps, did you go straight to Richmond?
So my last duty station was in Quantico, Virginia.
Okay.
I spent some time as the head machine gun instructor at the officer school there.
Cool.
Yeah. And that was that's actually a pretty important step. I went from, just being an infantry grunt to being an instructor, and I'd asked for the duty. And lo and behold, I find myself standing in an auditorium in front of 150 lieutenants talking about something that I absolutely love, which was machine guns. And, it was fun. And I got a chance to really get that public speaking bug. I don't mind being in front of people at all, talking and presenting and, getting people excited about it. And, of course, it's not too hard to get Marines excited about machine guns, but, but that's the chore now with processes. But anyways, that was a big part in my development, and something that I really found out that I enjoyed was talking in front of people.
Before you go to the next
Sure.
step or what came after when you landed in Richmond, Virginia and such, there's a lot of what you just said that I think a lot of people would resonate with, even if people weren't in Marine Corps or service, and like on their behalf, on mine, thank you.
Yep,
appreciate
absolutely.
the service in a big
My
way.
pleasure.
9 years is no joke.
Yeah.
Right. You did it. It was not just one stint, right? It wasn't just 4 years. Like you re-upped.
Yeah. And I kind of, so I enlisted for 4 years, and then I had the opportunity as part of our deployment cycle to go to Japan, but I had to extend for 6 months. So I did that, and I extended for 6 months. And when we came back from the States, I actually re-enlisted for 3 years.
Okay.
Yep. So I re-enlisted for 3 years, and right as that 3-year enlistment was kind of beginning, it was when I was kind of up for a duty station change. And part of the reason why I re-enlisted was I was having so much fun. I wasn't really sure still where I was going to go, but I knew that the Marines was a big part of my life. And I got the opportunity to request a duty station change. And as a funny story, my platoon sergeant said, my friend is, the guy in charge of machine gun sergeants. I can call him and you can go to Quantico if you want. And he called him and he's like, you can go. And I said, let me think about it. He goes, no. He goes, it's now or it's over. And I said, let's do it.
Yeah.
And so I went to Quantico, and I spent, I want to say it was 2.5 years there.
Okay.
And that really put me at about 7.5 years if you're doing the math. And I got out. So it was, early 2000s,
Okay.
and I was done. And that was where I had found that job. So my wife and I moved to Richmond, Virginia, and then 9/11 happens. And I remember watching the whole 9/11 transpire, and my commitment for the Marines was done, but I knew that I had to go back. And so at some point I just said to my wife, I said, we're going to war. This is what I do.
Yeah.
I'm going
Wow.
back in and this big conversation and had to go talk to the command for Delta 4th LAR, Delta Company 4th LAR Battalion. And they said, yep, come on. And so I re-enlisted for 1 year. So I'd probably been out for over a year at that point. So I put the uniform back on and deployed to Iraq for 6 months from April of 2003 to October of 2003. So yeah, it was some broken time.
Yeah, Darby, I had no idea. I'm glad
Yeah.
I asked.
Yeah.
Because you talked about after year 3 at Allegheny College, how you knew you needed something different, a change, a challenge. Hey, we talk about Into the Storm. That's a hell of a storm right there.
Yes.
Charging into it, doing the uncomfortable, the putting your life on the line,
Right.
going away from what was arguably a lot more comfortable and
For
easy
sure.
path at Allegheny College. And then you keep at it, right? I'm sure there were countless storms that you encountered in the military, but to be done, and then when something so major happens to our country, for you to re-enlist,
Right.
that's another storm. Like you got 2 top tenors that we've probably had on here. I got goosebumps when you were telling me about
Yeah.
that. Are there the other thing that you mentioned is you asked for the duty. That, boy, when it comes to if you want something in work, professional life, personal life, whatever, knowing what you want being the first step, right? Like pen to paper, or just intentionally thinking forward of where do you see yourself, but then having the guts to raise your hand to be vocal. We were talking about Rob Smith from Accutech. One of the things he talks is promote yourself. You've gotta, if you want something, you can't expect people to read your mind or to guess. You're not entitled to anything. If you want something, go get it, be vocal about it. And in your case, that's how you went into being more of an instructor role, right?
Yep.
What if you had to, I'm sure that there's more than we could ever fit in an episode or 5 of a podcast with what you went through, what it meant to you, and all of that. But being that we're talking about leadership, that we're talking about culture, in that phase before we move to the next step in your journey, anything else that comes to mind that kind of shaped who you are, that holds true to your own leadership mentality, or just that, is like that nagging sticks with you, that is a part of who you are because of Marine Corps and your experiences that you had?
Yeah. And, I think that, when you're in something that's bigger than yourself, right? Like, so the Marines they get this, steeped in tradition and everything. And there were a lot of days where it just sucked. And that it sucks. And you embrace it, and you just becomes something that you're getting through with your comrades, right? You're the guy to your left and to your right, and you know that he's suffering just as bad as you are. But you also know that, to talk to those people, right? That you lean on them. And that's a lot of what I do now when I'm dealing with teams of people is I want to make sure everybody's voice is heard. I want to make sure everybody contributes to the idea as we're building a process or documenting a process or optimizing a process. Like, everybody has a perspective and a viewpoint on it. Whether you're the beginning, the end, the middle, everybody puts in their 2 cents to it, and you build it as a team. And so, that's a lot of times I would look to, I was in charge of several of, Marines at one point, come up to me with a problem, and you say, well, fix it, right? How are you going to fix it? Or go into your immediate action, or whatever it is. But you have to rely on them to have a voice and be part of that process to fix things.
Yeah.
That teamwork part of it is really, really what I take with me and live every day.
Sure.
Because I don't have all the best ideas, right? Somebody that's got a different perspective than I do is going to have just as good idea. We just have to hear it. We have to get it into the pool and talk it over and whatever.
When there is good teamwork, camaraderie, trust, the higher likelihood of people speaking up and contributing that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Processes built in silos miss crucial components,
right?
Right? If somebody's not fully informed on all of it.
Yeah. And the other part of it, you talk about into the storm, is, we would just know that when we were going to do something, there was a high probability that we weren't going to have a whole lot of fun, right? We knew that it was going to be cold. Look at the weather report and go, we're going to the field. It's going to be raining. We went to Iraq, knew we were going to, potentially face life-threatening situations or, whatever it was. And you just do it. And it changes your mentality. You get to a point where I don't want to say you're not afraid of things, but you're really not afraid of things anymore. You just put your head down and plow into it. And you just do it, whether you like it or not. I say that that's a good and a bad thing, right? Because sometimes it gives you a little bit of false bravado, right? And you should listen to the early warning system in your brain. Go, hey, dummy, this may not be the best idea. And you go, we'll see what happens.
It sounds like there is something there, though, about disconnecting the emotion from the logic, or disconnecting the fear being a part of that. But Would you say that's an apt kind of assessment of how you were describing that? Is
It-
compartmentalizing or separating the two in your thought process to?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you don't have to worry about the emotion involved with it, and you just know that there's something that has to get done, it makes life a lot easier, right? Because certainly when you're dealing with people every day, right? That's what, you know, people, process, and tools, right? That's why leaders have the hardest job that there is, because you're dealing with people and they have emotions. And if you can disconnect the emotion, right, your emotion, and understand where they're coming from, it makes it a little bit easier to at least appreciate their perspective, become empathetic.
Just being able to identify why you're feeling the way you're feeling about things, having that level of self-awareness, self-regulation, right, to be like, well, this is the reality of it. That's not going to do me any good in this situation. I'm going to focus on this. Like that level of emotional intelligence we talk about all the time within leadership, within healthy cultures. People can improve that, right? It's something you can actually just work on through learning, through experience, through influence of others. So I just want to call attention to that when you were kind of describing some of those things, because I think that probably does resonate with listeners too.
Yeah.
Before we move off of that, because I know there's surely much more there, but any other storms, any other pieces that you think are worthy of mention before moving in, or should we just get into you and your wife back in Richmond, Virginia, kind of the next step in the journey?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's plenty of storms, I guess, but just not taking it too seriously, not overthinking it. And that's a problem that I have. I'm an overthinker, right? Even just coming here today, overthought it.
Yeah.
But being aware of, that's one of my storms, is that, everything I do, I just overthink. But that's just the way that I'm wired. So, and, back to the, not to go too far, but like, you can become too emotionally detached as well. You know what I mean?
No doubt.
And so, that's part of the other thing. My wife will give me a look sometimes and she'll be like, can you just like have some emotion over this for, oh, well, okay, but I've got to get the mission done.
Yeah.
Whatever it is,
With all things, balance, right?
Balance, right?
The empathy, but then also the separation of emotion from it. It's the challenge that I think every leader, every human probably has, is finding balance in all things, right?
Right. Well, I mean, if people did find more balance, right, you probably have a lot less craziness going on.
No doubt. All right. So that brings us back. Your hearing maybe went down a notch or two from nearly 9 years of machine guns, heavy artillery, traveling around the country, charging into a whole bunch of storms. And then what? You got back after your second enlistment, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And where'd you go? What'd you do?
While I was in Iraq, my daughter was born. And so I get to meet my daughter for the very first time when she's 3 months old.
Whoa.
Yeah, there's a lot we didn't cover in the pregame.
Yeah.
But yeah, my daughter was born. So the cool part about it was that my wife is from the Cleveland area. We were living in Richmond. She moved back down to Richmond. And so I got we had this great opportunity to just learn about each other and bond with my daughter and just kind of be away from everybody. She's from a large family, and it allowed that challenge to then be realized, right? And so we got to be this little tiny family. And the job I was working at was a great job, and it wasn't anything that was super taxing. I was a construction inspector, something I had, kind of learned as I entered entry level position.
Sure.
And so that was wonderful, but it was ending. And so the project was coming to an end, and we had the opportunity to move to Northern Virginia, basically Washington, D.C., or Alaska. And we chose neither.
Okay.
We chose Cleveland, Ohio. Moved up here. My friend got me a job in manufacturing. with a company, and I was the second shift team manager, and you kind of entered that workforce being a leader. In manufacturing, it's not fun, but tackled that and went back to college, decided that
Okay.
was going to be something that I was a lifelong goal of mine. I still wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, but I'm a learner by nature. I continually am trying to learn something new. The company I was working for was extremely generous and paid for my schooling. So, I at that point I'd gotten onto first shift. I was going to work every day, working, 10 hours. I would leave there and head downtown to Cleveland State University and take 2 or 3 classes an evening, and then drive back home, back to Avon Lake, and back to being a dad and bath time and putting kids to bed. And
Still 1 at that time, or had you?
At that point we were on 2 and 3.
Okay.
4 came along. My wife said, she's like, listen, I need you to be here.
Yeah. Well, you have 14 now, right?
Yeah. No, it's just, yeah. No, and we ended at 4, but I took a little bit of a break and still working with my same company. I kept on working my way up. And at that company, they had a really program of continuous improvement.
Nice.
And I got to be a part of that. And I got to be on kind of the steering committee, as that went. And, they were very committed to making things better at all times. 5S events, Kaizen events, just always picking a new project. And, they would last for a couple weeks at a time, and it would begin with, and that's where a lot of my foundation for what I do now came in.
Sure.
But, kept on working my way up and kept on going to college and took a little break and back to college eventually. But yeah, so that's a lot of where I learned some of the things that I do now.
Sure.
When I started to talk about processes for other people, I understood the value of everybody on that team knowing exactly what's supposed to happen, right? And it's not going to be 100%, right? If you can get 80% in the process, you only have to worry about 20%. And so, we would try to dial everything in.
What do you think the value is for, say, a business is early stages, tasting some success, but readying to scale or trying to hire additional people and go from 5 humans to 20, right? Like, have you seen or have any examples of where a process was in place that enabled it or wasn't, that didn't? Like, what do you think the difference is for those that are poised to grow or, maybe in the process of growing and realizing, hey, we need to tighten these up?
The importance of that is it really can't be understated. And so in my experience, I got on board with a small company here in the area, Mr. Level Concrete Leveling, and they were experiencing really good growth. And what you have to, the challenge is keeping everybody on the same page. It's managing that growth so that when you're bringing more people on, everybody has to know how they fit into the piece of the puzzle, right? Everybody wants to know why, right?
Sure.
And just as human beings, it's our natural inclination is to know why I'm doing something, right? And you can certainly, in the Marines, I had plenty of time where, it was like, why am I doing this? And it's because I said so. And for the Marines, that serves a purpose, right? That serves that unwavering discipline.
Yeah.
That just go do it. You have to be able to go do that. In the civilian world, you get more accomplished with knowing the why, knowing where you fit into the piece, where that puzzle, how that all goes together, where you fit into it. And so that's the challenge. And so as it grows, if you're not able to then tell somebody, or even better, show somebody exactly where you fit into that workflow, right? There's a thing called a cross-functional workflow where it's a whole bunch of different people and positions and how it flows from the beginning to the end. It dawns on them and they can see now, oh, I'm here. Here's what comes next. Here's 10 steps down the way.
Yeah.
And you can see a lot of times you see that light bulb come on with them, right? And then they'll have this great idea. And it's not even something huge. They'll just go, why are you doing it backwards? Right? Like put it this way. And then that way you don't have to redo it 10 steps down the way or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. So it's really that big playbook. It's keeping everybody on the same.
I've lived it. I'm sure many people have, when there was either a well-formed process that you realized there was consistency, people on the same page, or something where people sitting right next to each other were doing things completely different ways. Right. And how big of a difference it could make. And there's always that argument of, especially if it's more sales-minded folks, right? Needing to adapt to the customer. It's different every time. And process accounts for there being some variable change between them, but also areas of non-negotiable, or where it is more of a procedure, more of a clearly defined versus outline process, right? I mean, what is some of do you have any examples of times that there was resistance that eventually somebody saw why it was beneficial or advantageous? Like,
I don't think I have a necessary explicit example, but I can read it on people's faces. You have people that are married to something that they created. They have a bias.
Sure.
Right. And you can see the other members of the team start to like kind of look at them cross-eyed when they want to keep doing what they're doing. And a lot of times it dissipates very quickly, right? When they see that there's a bigger picture, that by doing something a certain way, they're helping the people that they work with. And I think that's the beauty about a procedure or a process, right? A lot of people think that this procedure or this process is you're going to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? All the way down the line. Yes, it's certainly part of that. But by hitting those wickets, it then allows you to have some creativity in some of the other parts of the situation that aren't going to be solved by the process or the procedure. You're never going to solve all things with a process. If you did, you're a miracle worker. Mm-hmm. There's always going to be something that pops up. And so you want that person to be able to think for themselves, but you also want them to make sure that they got the name, the phone number, the address, whatever it is, right? And then they can go into that problem-solving mode for the customer with more focus,
sure,
more creativity, and say, well, let me see what I can do.
Not needing to come up with all of that themselves each and every time.
Right.
So you miss stuff. Even if you've done things 100 times, 1,000 times, it doesn't mean that you'll repeat it without it being captured, documented some way for you to keep yourself honest and to look at it. So,
and that's a key point. That repeatability is really what you want to be able to do. Is you want to have repeatability with those processes.
For sure. See, and while I've in previous organizations and with Culture Shock led the formation of process, I've built processes around certain things, I still found crazy value in working with you. And I think we have different definitions of what fun is, because you were talking about you got in the military, couldn't leave it because of how much fun it was. I'm thinking that's scary as shit. But then also how process maybe isn't so fun for you. I feel like you probably do get a thrill out of it as well. But in that session, when we sat down with my team members here and you, can we just talk about that a little bit, to kind of our origin, how we got to first meet each other, how I got to see what you do with clients, and kind of the value that comes with that objective person. I'm always learning.
Right.
I'm never going to say that I'm the foremost expert in anything, because the moment I do, the only thing that I know is true is I don't know shit, right? And then I'll learn something new the next day. But I have built processes and things. When I went through that, I was like, boy, I felt like a newbie because you asked questions that made me realize, oh, I didn't really make it repeatable in this way, or I haven't really accounted for. So, boy, I talked all about that and didn't really give you a question, but let's talk when we were in that situation. Yeah. I mean, what was your thought process, or what was your process?
I think one of the things before I get into that is that you made a good point in that you have built processes before or whatever. And every business, every organization, every person has a process for everything that they do, right? Anytime you do something, it's repeatable, right? The one-offs and the low repeat, ones aren't going to be ones that you're going to build a process for, but subconsciously you just think about it and you build a process. Where I think one of the dangerous things is that you leave somebody to build the process by themselves. And so we'll lead into where we're going with how we did. But if you don't give that employee, and so if you're a leader, right? And one of the worst things I think you can say is figure it out, right? Just go figure it out. I have a problem. Okay, figure it out. You have to support those employees or those people under your charge with, that comes back to that teamwork. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to make a process that's effective, right? You want it to be effective. You want it to solve the problem. You want it to become repeatable with high quality. But you also want it to be efficient. And so left to your own device, right? Every employee or every person is going to say, I'll do it this way because it's effective.
Yeah.
Okay. They may actually even be efficient in what they're doing in their little microcosm of what they're doing. Okay. But it has to be effective and efficient in the bigger picture. Okay. So I always, for some reason, use colors, right? So if you're ahead of me in the process and you have a blue one and a red one, and you put the blue one on top, and then you hand it to me, and I immediately have to take the red one and put it on top of the blue one, right? It was effective. You got the stuff to me, but it wasn't overall efficient because now I had to redo something that you did. And it may only take a second, but if we're doing it thousands of times a day, right? And so there's always a process. It has to be effective. It has to be efficient. So when I take the approach of looking at someone's processes and helping them document them and optimize them, right? You want to have that team approach. You want to have kind of everybody in that value stream or that process or whatever you want to call it, sitting in the room. And so that was the approach I took with you guys. And so when I had first met Kimberly here at EOS, she and I were talking about some things, and we were talking about some of the processes here, and we had worked on what I call quote to cash, right? It's kind of a service model where you have somebody that's inquiring about your services all the way to collecting their money, and everything in between. You want to capture all that. And we sat down with you and Pete and Liz, and I one of the first things I said was, no notes, right? Don't worry about taking notes. We're in front of a big whiteboard, and we're just gonna write down exactly what happens in its current state, right? Yeah. Because there is a process. But I don't want you taking notes. I don't want you thinking about what you have to write down to remember. I'm going to do all of that up on the board because I want you as the process owners actively engaged in what we're doing. I want you thinking about, even if it's not your step, if you're 10 steps down the way, I still want you thinking about what's going on at step 1, 2, 3, 8, right? And it's very simple. You just have to capture what they're doing right now. And my position of being an outsider, right? It gives me the perspective of being able to scrutinize things that are outside your bias.
Sure.
And so I see things that other people don't. I was in a session a couple of weeks ago with some folks, and they said, "Oh, we enter this in here, and then 3 steps down, we enter." And I said, "Wait, you've already done it once. Why are you doing it twice?" "Oh," and they kind of all 3 of them looked at each other, and they didn't have an answer. And it was almost that, probably the worst answer ever. We've just kind of always done it that way, and it's like, okay, well, that's 5 minutes of your time. You have 100 customers a month.
Right.
You have, 12 months out of the year. Like, how much time is now being wasted where you can put it into something more productive? But map that current state out on that whiteboard, right? And then put it into a workflow diagram. And then everybody has a perspective. They're up out of the weeds, looking from, whatever cliched 30,000 view you want to talk about, but they're looking down at the process, and they're able to see it from a perspective that they don't see on the daily basis.
And boy, that ties right into some of what we were talking about with people need to understand the why. People struggle disconnecting the emotion from things if they're the ones who have formed it, right? And they can't really see the big picture or look at things through that lens. I think often people want to embrace change. They don't want to be thought of as those that say that's how we've always done it or what have you. But it's easier said than done. When you're living in it day to day, sometimes you don't even recognize there's an opportunity to challenge it or that there is an opportunity for efficiency, right?
Right.
So your process of getting us all together, being an unbiased, objective person, ask us some questions of why do you do it that way? And it's not from an accusatory manner. It's just forcing us to think, why do we do it that way? Is there a better way?
Right. Root cause analysis, right? You ask why 5 times, you can usually get to the bottom of really why are you doing it?
Yeah.
And I sound like sometimes like a 4-year-old. Why, daddy? Why? But it's a game almost, right? And then you can see the realization on people's faces when they get down to it and they're married to it or something, but then they don't really have a great reason. And it kind of breaks that barrier where they can finally go, well, let's change it then.
Right.
Like, let's make it more efficient. Or, I don't have to do this twice. I can just do it once. And then those process owners, right? Then they can start to repurpose their folks or whatever, but get to that root cause analysis. Why?
There's something about the camaraderie aspect, not wanting to let somebody else down, being more willing to change because it's in service to others. Like we talk all the time, people change from either an abundance of information, an abundance of pain, or influence and accountability from others. And it's helpful when you've got a combination of those two. You talked about in the military how you're kind of doing it for your brothers. You're doing it for those that you're on the mission with in a lot of ways. Like, it's going to suck, but it's going to suck for them too. So you rise to it. Coupled with how in the military, it's more do it because I told you to. Whereas when there's involvement, when you might have 100% of the equation, but you omit 10% or 20% to then get collective involvement and buy-in, there's skin in the game. People come out of that process of identifying clearly forming process or challenging it to refine it and make it better. I don't care if I'd been doing something for 20 years. Like there was value in that for us because of those factors, right? It's like the collaborative aspect. Now we're all in it together. We want to commit to one another, but also feel like we're heard, we're represented. There is that communal or collaboration. Now we're all bought in, right? Even if we didn't agree on something, we had the opportunity to influence otherwise. And ultimately we commit, we lock arms, and we go forward together that this is the process. I can see that being helpful even when there are established processes in place that have been for a while. Is that something you're focused on too? Or is it primarily let's really get into Delta business strategies? And that I think we did lay out kind of a part of your process and how it worked with us, how we got to here today. But tell us, who is your target audience, or who would benefit most from a consultation or a conversation with you about their processes in some way? What does that look like?
I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this part of it.
For sure.
It's it's the small company that's experiencing some explosive growth.
Mhm.
It's small to mid-size. It's the small to mid-size company that's experiencing a problem, right? And these problems come in many forms. You can have, you can have someone that just holds on to that knowledge and then they leave for whatever reason, and they kind of break the process. Or you have these people that are, they they're not great team players for whatever reason. But you have to kind of break that. You got to kind of break those people out. But it's those companies that are growing, that have a problem, or just know that it's the best foundation you can build for your company to help it grow, right? Even if you're just like, hey, listen, I'm a small company, I'm a lifestyle or whatever, but I have a great idea, things are going well. Like, let's document it right now, because that's where all that growth is going to build from. Sometimes it's better to get ahead of it than to be, hey, we're ready to grow now,
Sure.
or I'm so busy I can't get out of my own way. Building that it's really anybody that's got a company or an organization that wants to build that foundation for all their employees, right? I have a friend that owns a business, and he said, we were talking about this whole thing as I'm building Delta Business Strategies. He's bouncing ideas off of them and stuff. And I said, well, what about your processes? And he's like, yeah, I got to get to work on them. And I'm okay. Let's talk about them. And I instantly just dive into why. Why don't you have them or whatever? He purchased the company from a relative, and it's the company that's 70 some years old, I think, maybe even more than that. But he has a person that works for him that's been working there for a long time. I said, what does so-and-so do? And he goes, she gets a lot of stuff done, and she's like main cog in the wheel. And I said, well, is she going to want to retire one day? And it came about to, I need to do this, but it's time, right? So that's the other part of it, right? So it's the company that knows that this needs to be done, but doesn't necessarily have the time to do it. There are certain advantages, certainly, to doing it internally. I think the beauty of the way that I handle it is that I become a part of your organization, right? I just assimilate right in. We do a little bit of discovery. I learn about how you're going to do things. We start to map things out. But I'm looking at it I'm an outsider, but I'm looking about how I can help your whole team get better.
You seem like you got involved with us, but then also got the hell out of the way and put the ownership back on us sometimes, right? But
yeah, I think that's important, right? Like I'm not there to implement. I'm just there to help. I can be to a certain degree, but it really is for the leaders of the company, right?
Right.
And so, that was my point. It was going to be time. So it's for the leaders of the company. You need to be able to hold your people accountable to what their tasks are. If everybody's bought in, if everybody's doing, work, rowing in the same direction, right? That's a certain help in accountability, right? It helps everybody else along the way. They're all bought in, right? But to get to that point where you have those processes documented, you have to make the investment in time. And so that time is either going to come from your internal employees, or you can bring someone like me in to give you that fresh perspective and do the work for you. At least the building and the documenting, and later on the improvement, right? But you have to then take somebody out of your revenue stream, right? I mean, I would imagine most companies don't have people standing around with extra time on their hands.
generally not.
Right. And so they've got it. They have to have the time to do it. They have to sort of have the inclination and the awareness to be able to facilitate it in a certain manner, right? I'm not saying you have to do it like mine, like the way I would do it, but facilitate it and then document it, and all the steps along the way that you're pulling them out of your revenue stream, right? So if you've tried to hire anybody recently, it's a nightmare. Let alone have extra people lying around. So that's where I think that Delta Business has, I don't want to say an advantage, but that's certainly what I can add to you don't have to have somebody that's on your payroll. Come in, we get it done. We document some things. We get it all on paper. We get the team all rowing in the same direction. Prioritize projects for the future.
Yeah.
And we say, this is some of that low hanging fruit. Like, what can we tackle? Prioritize them. And then we say, let's tackle this one in 2 months. Let's tackle this one a month later. Let's tackle this one. And we just come back in and it's the same process over and over again. You come in and you just tear that little step, that step down, do the current state as is.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody that's a stakeholder, you even bring outside folks in and you rebuild that step, right? Especially if you have a bottleneck or something along there that's just causing you problems, and the leadership knows, right? Or if they don't know, it'll become apparent when you do that big overarching current state as is.
For sure. So coming out of that, there's lots of additional work to be done, I imagine, on sub processes.
Well, it's never end. If you're gonna stop trying to beat your competition, right? You might as well just throw the towel in now. Why put the effort in now, right? So it's always, because there's always new technology,
True.
right? I mean, talking with you the other day, you threw a whole bunch of things at me, how to use Fiverr and ChatGPT and all these, and I'm like, holy cow, I hadn't even thought of this, right? So that perspective from you was amazing and gives me plenty of ideas. One of the things I like to make sure that I do is when we're involving somebody in a process is get the IT person involved. Because they always have, so many times I've seen, right? Somebody has this laborious procedure to do something, and somebody with a little bit of technology goes, oh, I got a better way.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, everybody's just, their minds are blown, and we've just saved ourselves tons of time.
No doubt.
Right?
And the flip side, that I think having their involvement, where often that's where you get pushback on, well, there's a reason or security measure or something in place as to why we can't do it that way, or why it is this arduous process, right?
Right.
When there's a why. Having that sort of a facilitator come in, I don't know with Delta Business Strategy if you position as consultants or not. I don't see you necessarily as a consultant. I don't know if I've ever talked to you about this, but like at Culture Shock, we pride ourselves in being anti-consultants. And it's because we've all been burned in some way by a consultant where there was business needs that changed and we're no longer realizing the value that we thought, or there's an assessment and here's what you need to do. You work through it. Like the facilitation of the workshop with the deliverable that you handed us, it wasn't just like, all right, go run off and do this now. Here was my 2 cents or assessment. Like you were part of the team. You were part of it with us, with that invaluable outside perspective to challenge, not in an asshole way either. All right. Like I think we're all open to that. Sometimes we're okay with it. We can be assholes, but it came from a very genuine, compassionate, but also like experienced place. It felt like. Have you thought about that aspect, or like, have you had anyone else tell you that?
Not in that depth, but I certainly appreciate that perspective. And, I think that the consultant name, I don't really care for it either, but you get roped into, right? A lot, you fill out a form. What do you do? It's kind of consulting, but yes, I love the term facilitator so much more, because it's more inclusive. Right. And I do this kind of annoyingly with a lot of people that I meet, when I start to talk to them about what their processes are, or even if it's just like a normal problem, my wife gets so angry because I like as soon as there's a problem, like I go into problem solving.
Yeah.
Right. And I just want to get to the end where there's a system in place. All right. And that's part of my cold being week. I know you want to talk about those. I want to put a system in place that solves the problem, and embedding myself in with that team of people and becoming part of them, right? They don't view me as an outsider. They become a little bit more open to me. And that's just kind of who I am. Like I'm just a dude, right? Like that's all I am. And I like to solve the problem, and I like to be involved in a way that I can celebrate the victory with you. I can ask those questions without being an asshole. Certainly I could drop into Marine mode and be that guy, but I'm not, right? I like to embed myself in there. And so I'm glad that was the perspective, that experience that you had with me in those sessions, because they are fun. It's fun to do.
Yeah. It was funny going into it. One of our team members, Pete, was like, oh yeah, this will be in and out pretty quick, and didn't grasp necessarily the layers of complexity or just how many things were included in our holistic sales process. Or
he had a great aha moment. He had a great aha moment where he thought, and he questioned, and I didn't even play an active role in his aha moment, right? You and Liz did. He was talking and he asked a question or something about why it has to be so involved, and the explanation came from within, and he just went,
yeah,
I see now. And afterward, towards the end, he said, this is great, even though that's not probably where he wanted to, that wasn't where he expected to be at the beginning, right? He thought it was going to be in and out, like you said. And so that aha moment, that to me is when I see the aha moment with people, that's very rewarding for me.
And we see that we have the same thing, right? That's what's most gratifying, or what we get a lot of satisfaction out of. We often talk about focus your time on things that align with your unique ability or instinctive strength, where you offer the most value, get the most satisfaction, and it's just most in sync, with who you are and what you do most naturally. It seems like Delta Business Strategy is what you're doing now. That aligns pretty darn closely. Some people are much more process-minded than others. I imagine it might get you into trouble in your personal life a little bit when you're always trying to problem solve or going through process instead of sometimes just listening. Have you built in a clarifying question in the beginning to say, are we problem solving or just listening, like at home at least?
There's no clarifying question. It's I could read the nonverbal clues.
Okay.
Right.
So
the side eye comes at me, or when I know that my wife's just venting.
I can be wrong. I'm often wrong in trying to identify some of those verbal cues. I think I'm good.
Well, I didn't say I was good.
All right.
I certainly get in trouble plenty. But yeah, it's been a learning process internally, for my wife and I. It's just, it's solving those things. And so one of the fun stories I like to tell, is having the discretion of knowing when to solve a problem and when not to solve a problem. So early on at a place I worked, it was, hey, we have a problem. And it was almost like multiple problems coming at us at one time, right? So these are good problems. These are explosive growth problems, right? So it's not like bad things, but multiple problems coming at us. But it's like, okay, how often does that problem happen? Okay, and someone's very insistent because they own that step. right? And so it happened to be a collections problem. And it was, what, I don't remember what it was, but it was, we have to solve this. And I said, okay, well, how often does it happen? Well, probably, once or twice a month. And and you have another problem coming at you from this, and you go, how often does this one happen? This is an operations problem, right? Well, this is happening almost every week. Okay. We're not going to solve this collections problem right now. We're going to solve the ops problem first.
Yeah.
And it was really, and certainly you deal with somebody that, we haven't helped that person do their job, this collections person, right? Because we haven't solved their problem, but we're solving a bigger problem first. So we prioritized it. We've executed on this one. We've solved it. It becomes part of the process. Everybody's fine with it. The collections problem pops back up. And this was the active conversation we had. Hey, that problem's back and you didn't solve it the first time. And I would say, I think it's probably time to solve this one, right? And everybody would be like, yeah, we don't have anything else going on, right? Problem solving. We don't have anything else going on. Let's solve this one. And then all of a sudden we reprioritized and got back to that other problem. But you make a list or whatever it is you do. But it's kind of, you don't have to, you can't tackle every problem. And so I think that's part of that. Once you get past that documentation phase, right? So you've mapped the current state, you've gone into the documentation, you now have this process on paper, and then leadership looks at it and they say, these are the problems we want to tackle. You have to tackle them at a cadence that's right for your organization.
Sure.
You can't just slam every new process and procedure at a group of people. They're just going to get overwhelmed and you're going to be counterproductive. You come at them with the appropriate cadence. And if it sticks and you come to it early, you go back to it early, right?
Having that platform and language, just that collaborative environment to air all this out, it helps you prioritize as a group too. And we talk about the Eisenhower matrix, combination of, is it important? Is it urgent? Is it one or the other? And then also smart goal setting. Is it specific, measurable, achievable, realistic or relevant, depending on who you're asking, and time bound. And even as it pertains to time management, and if you're trying to delegate, we talk with groups all the time about a way to give a positive no when something is delegated to you is by simply saying, would you be open to looking at or helping me find out where this fits in terms of priority? Because here's the other things that I have working right now. That laying out, like, yes, I can absolutely help with that. However, so you're aware, here are the other important and urgent things that are taking my focus and attention. Is that worthy of deprioritizing one of those? Often the answer is no, but somebody would never. Urgency is high for one party and not for the other. So a lot of times, when something is passed on, or you ask an admin or ask another department to do something, it's like now, without understanding that big picture prioritization. So this platform being able to lay out, hey, we have 1 or 2 issues a month here. The other guy's saying, I have 15 a week. If there wasn't that collaborative discussion, the person with 1 or 2 a month is like, hello, this is a major issue, because that's what you're living in, right? So that's, again, kind of a success story, but I think also speaks to just the objectivity. The outside party, having somebody work through this sort of stuff with your organization can be super helpful. And when you get to a different level of growth in your company, you start to establish continuous improvement departments where that is the focus. Like I've taken part in Kaizen and done other process improvement initiatives and led some of those as well. But we had thousands and thousands of employees. There was a department that is what the primary focus was. And there's a whole lot in between who have the best intentions, but there's never enough time, right? That point that you made, you need it. You've got Susie with all the institutional knowledge in the world that either through lack of discipline in capturing a process or even personal security by being the sole keeper of the knowledge, maintains value, but also limits the ability to scale. Often companies don't put process into place or don't really refine it the way it should be until they're forced to. When they lose Susie or the owner, the founder, the leader who, was the doer of all these things, but not necessarily the documenter and the trainer of all these things. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. So, I think that one of those, one of the interesting things is that when you have this person that started the company, you have that founder. A lot of times what I find is that they have this bulldozer mentality. Right? They can knock a wall down, get through a problem. So they've been effective, right? But they haven't been efficient. Or maybe they have been this time. But as you bring people into your organization, as you expand your labor pool, right? Most of the people that you're going to bring in, they're not that entrepreneurial mindset. They're not that, otherwise they would have their own company, right? They're the employee mindset, and they want things kind of laid out. They're not asking to be spoon-fed. They love to be a part of it, but you have to, if you build that foundation of effective and efficient along with them, right? One, that founder can then have the peace of mind that it's being done in a manner that I approve, right? It's being done, so we're getting high quality, repeatable action. And I don't have to babysit it. I can walk away from it and only be called in when you've hit that 20% that the process doesn't cover. And so it adds trust to the organization. It also, you have turnover, it's very easy to train the next person.
Yeah.
And that founder can then go, it's happening, or the manager or whoever it is can say, I now trust that it's being done in an effective and efficient.
How many leaders, how many entrepreneurs burn out working in the business instead of on the business because they've not formed processes well enough?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point, right? So you can be in the business, and that's where most of your employees are going to be in the business. And if you just pull them out for a little bit of time and let them work on the business, right? And that owner or that entrepreneur gets to work on the business, right? Because it's a trust thing. If you don't trust that your employees are going to be able to handle the day-to-day, and you think that you have to be in that day-to-day, it's just exactly what you said. They burn out, right? They're constantly worried about how is it getting done right. I'm a guy that I like to sleep at night, right? And so I think that that's why I like to build processes around things. I'm very much schedule oriented, because if I know what I'm going to do, I can be prepared. I can handle. We were having this conversation before, and I'm not very spontaneous, right? My wife gets very mad because she's very spontaneous and is going to do something, and I'm,
You already have that plan. You've laid out the process of the day.
I was going to read, It allows some peace of mind so that then that entrepreneur can do what they do best, get out there and build the company, sell the company, however, figuratively sell it, but like how do I get that business to grow? Right? Like, how do I make it expand? And certainly the foundation of process allows your labor pool to do the right thing.
I feel like there's such overlap and parallel between it always being the right time to invest in your people and it always being the right time to invest in your process. Yet there's always priorities that get in the way of it. There's always the reason or excuse to not quite yet on some of these things. That once you have a date on a calendar, once you have a conversation, a commitment, an investment in an outside party or an investment of collective time in a meeting around this, you're less likely to abandon it and to put other things in the way of it. But it pays itself off over and over and over again. If you put your focus and effort into trust, it's a dividend. There's this concept, the speed of trust that we talk about. The same applies to team. The same applies to process. Because then you can step back, and we haven't talked much about it yet, but there's this EOS life. Right? Do what you love with the people you love, make a huge difference, be fairly compensated with enough time for other passions. And you don't get to that place if you're exclusively working in the business. So often, though, the folks I talk to don't quite take that ownership to say, if people aren't doing it to my standard, and boy, talking military background, extreme ownership is something we talk about all the time, defaulting to that place of, then what do I own? What could I do? It's not because they suck. It's not because they're unintelligent or incapable. So often it's because I've not done that transfer of knowledge from my brain into a way that is clear, transparent, repeatable, where everyone knows that is, or in the US world, FBA, followed by all. Right? Like, I don't mean to answer it for you or anything, but it's like having this conversation, I do get excited about it too, because I've seen kind of the highs and lows. We're going through it as well, but in every interaction I have with people around leadership and around team, we ask, like, is this a people issue? Is this a process issue? And we're not going into to really support too much. I mean, we can point towards resources, and in the EOS library, there's a great book called Process. We can point folks towards experts like you in it who may be of service. But usually for us, it's more on the people side or the strategic planning side if you're working with one of our implementers through EOS itself. Any thoughts, on the people versus process piece? And
well, yeah, I mean, they're married, right? You can't have one without the other. If you have people that don't have a process, they're not going to accomplish anything. If you have a process with no people, great, nothing's going to get done either, right?
Yeah.
And so by building the process with the people, right? We've already talked about buy-in. They marry up nicely, right? And most employees, they want it. They just want to give me the steps to do what I'm supposed to do, and listen to me if I have a suggestion to do it better.
Yeah.
Right. And so the way that I handle it, it works very well together. But from a leadership perspective, right? So we talk a lot about the people that are actually doing the process, right? Let's talk about the leader or the process owner on the other side, right? Because that's a thankless, super important job, right? And being the leader is probably the hardest job that there is. Given the opportunity, most people are gonna, especially at lower levels, right? Entry level or whatever, most people are gonna choose to be a doer as opposed to be a leader, because there's emotions and there's accountability and there's extra hours and there's all this other stuff that's involved, right? But those people are just as important as the people that are actually doing it. By having a process, getting that knowledge, whether that leader is the manager or the owner or whoever developed the process, but getting that knowledge out to the doers, right? Now the leader can focus on being a leader. Now the leader, in the Marines, we had 2 jobs as a leader: mission accomplishment and troop welfare. And the Marines, being the Marines, would always say mission accomplishment comes first and troop welfare comes second. But we all knew that take care of people, your mission's going to be easier.
Yeah.
Right. And so we always just put them on the same playing field, right? So it's the same thing in business. You still have to accomplish the mission, and you still have to take care of your people. If you're not bogged down working in the business of what that process is, the leader can actually then have more time to take care of those people. And sometimes taking care of those people are just having the time to have a conversation with them. Do the performance reviews, do the, if you're in EOS, doing those,
quarterly check-ins.
Yeah. Right. having these conversations with people just so that they're being heard. And there are so many times when leaders are just putting out fires, fixing problems. And meanwhile, the people component is being neglected because of the process component you haven't built the foundation. The process is never going to go anywhere.
Right.
Right? The people could cycle in and out all the time, right? And if you have turnover, you want to assimilate them into the process as quickly as you possibly can, right? Nobody wants to go into a 6-week training cycle so that you can then realize you don't like the job or whatever.
Yeah.
Those leaders benefit from it as well because they're able to then help accountability, help that emotional person, right, be a part of the organization.
No doubt. No doubt. The struggle for time. Nobody has enough time.
Nobody.
Right?
Never.
But we have the choice to either do the hard thing now, knowing it'll free us up to have time to spend on the right things, or just continue to suffer through the same thing with this one day. And delegation is one of them. The biggest excuse we hear, or hurdle, is when you delegate, it takes more time at first because you need to train, because you need to set expectations. Well, yeah, but if you don't go through that initial hump up, you'll never get the downhill, path that you can now focus where you offer the most value. And a lot of companies, it seems like, or the reality is that an owner, a founder, when they start the organization, they may offer the most value by doing the doing. But that shifts. As your team grows, you are the mayor. You are the one who can offer the most unique value in other ways and need to be able to say, it may not be convenient. It never will be. Now is the time to do this because this will enable me to focus where it matters most. Right?
I mean, that owner had a vision for a reason, right? And they have a vision of what, and if they're doing, right? If they're doing the work, they can implement the vision.
Right. So what's that catalyst? What's that lightning rod to say, like, now's the time? Is it I guess like we talked about, change happens when pain, knowledge, or influence? Like, have you seen folks or in your experience, you said when they're propelling to new levels of growth, right? Any other?
I was part of that.
Yeah.
When I joined Mr. Level, that's what I was brought in to do. And the owner, Joe, he was able to take the ball and run with making the company better. And, he had this clear vision of where he wanted to be.
Sure.
He certainly still had some sleepless nights, but he gave a lot of his sleepless nights to me, right? As we were working hand in hand, building the company together, but he has a different skill set than I do. And so he was able to take that skill set into on the business, my skill set in the business, right?
Yeah.
And then building those processes and people and tools and all of those things, down at this lower level. I lived it, and it's extremely rewarding for me because that's my mindset, right? It was drudgery for him, right? And it took a while for him to, it took some convincing for me to come over, right? I mean, I had a job before that, and, he just said, I want you to come work for me. And I said, probably not going to happen. And as it kept going and going and going, finally he said, here's where we are. And I said, I'm in, let's do it. And, we jumped in and built the processes. And actually one of the really interesting things is that some people don't like, right? Especially a small company. Some people look at those processes as being too constrictive and they choose to opt out, right? So those are probably people that are wrong person, wrong seat, or just wrong person, and so they opt out, make your job a little bit easier, right? Sometimes it's addition by subtraction.
Oh yeah. There's healthy churn for sure.
That's a for real thing. And so that person, right? So if you're that decision maker and you are struggling with knowing that you have to take this step into formalizing your processes, I would say look at your time. Look how you're spending your day. Are you enjoying what you're doing? If you're not, right? There's one in the con pile.
Yeah.
Right. If you're losing sleep over, accountability, because that's a big EOS tool, accountability, right? But you can't make people accountable if you haven't told them why.
Right.
Right. So you have to give them the guidance, right? That process involves. So you're struggling with, that trust, build a process. And certainly if you want to tackle it yourself, go right ahead. I'm not saying you can't. But I can help, right? People like me can help. And it's that outside perspective. It's a whole slew of things, right? That will help you sleep better at night.
Right.
And feel less pain during the day. Make you remember why you started that company. That enjoyment.
It's wild how much of our conversation, even though it's focused on process, naturally goes to like the psychology, the human factor in all this. And you said, people in process, they're married together. We're instinctively different, right? People in general. And we've touched on EOS, we've touched on Kolbe, and it sounded like through your own journey, you've demonstrated that continuous learning or pursuit of learning, not just through college education, but through Dan Sullivan's strategic coach program, I believe, right? Or at least some learnings from it with unique ability. And then with Kolbe as well. And it's funny because ours are pretty polarizing. We would probably frustrate the hell out of each other, but get some awesome freaking outcomes with some balanced perspective and modes of doing. Because you were, you mind if I share?
Yeah, absolutely.
7832. So rather high on the fact finder, but your initiating factor being follow through and systematizing of process. You're in the third continuum. Mine's a 9. Yours is a 3. So higher doesn't necessarily mean better, right? You stabilize.
Yeah, that's to say stabilize.
And I pour gasoline or, jump out of the airplane and then put the parachute on with a higher inclination to start quickly. And then we both are much more visual than we are build it with our hands, right? Doesn't mean you can't do any of these things, but to your point with previous work partner or, just folks that you've worked with, anyone can do anything, but some things will zap your energy.
Oh.
Others will give you more of it, right? And just align more with how you're wired. Clearly, there's some things not just from your own experience, but also just with who you are as a human that lend themselves to what you do, right? I mean, what would you say you've learned about yourself, or did this, when you went through unique ability, when you took your Kolbe, did it reaffirm, validate, redirect you? How did that shape your own awareness and actions that you took next?
It's a funny story. I was part of I'm going to go back a little bit.
Sure.
So when I first came to Cleveland, I had worked my way up in the company, and ownership came to us one day and said, we're going to go do this thing called EOS. And okay. And we all got traction.
Okay.
And I read it and I just devoured it. I was like, this is amazing. Like, it's a system. So unbeknownst to me, I'm like all about this thing, right?
Right.
So I'm reading traction. I think I read it twice before we started the actual the EOS process. But I read it. I was completely bought in. I loved it. I still do. I think it's amazing. And as I'm reading it, it didn't occur to me, but they keep on talking about this unique ability. And so I moved on from that company, went to another one, and I actually took some of the tools that I had learned from EOS to the other company. They didn't run EOS, but actually became the meeting facilitator at this other company. It was fun. I got invited to I came in as a production supervisor, sort of like a plant manager type person.
Okay.
Very established, 70-year company. great owners, I had great bosses, just absolutely amazing people at that company. It was actually very sad for me to leave, but that's where I left to go to Mr. Level. I got invited to be on the executive team, and I sat through the very first meeting, and it was like, we got anything done. And I sat through another one, and one of my boss came to me and he said, "What'd you think?" And I'm like, "I'm honest, I don't think we got anything done." And so I immediately sent out the level 10 meeting video from YouTube.
Yeah.
And right after that, they were like, "This is great. Like, let's do this." So they tried to, and I was not, I was just a participant. And then afterwards I said, "Well, I think you were part of the meeting and not the facilitator, right? That you might enjoy the process more and make it more done. Why don't I be the facilitator?" Right? That wonderful word again. Maybe that facilitator. So I ended up becoming the facilitator for the executive meetings. It was weekly meeting.
Yeah.
And then I became the facilitator for the quarterlies and the annuals. And so that was a fun thing. But that's not just part of that facilitator role that I have assumed or, brought to Delta Business. But we didn't do much else there with EOS. And so then when I came to Mr. Level, I'm bring some more. I love these tools, right? So I brought level 10 and I started reading traction again. I said, okay, now I got some processes documented, some other stuff. Like I'm going to start doing traction.
Sure.
So again, and I thought this unique ability thing keeps coming up. Oh, I forgot to mention before that, I had the previous company. I had done my Clifton strengths.
Okay.
So that's part of Colby. I'm part of unique ability. So I'd done my Clifton strengths and very eye-opening. They did it as a company. So all new hires, my level kind of had taken it. And I thought, and if you haven't taken Clifton strengths, it's this little tiny book, 34 strengths. Highly suggest everybody to take this. You read like 20 pages and then you take an assessment and it tells you what your strengths are. And the premise behind it is your strengths are your strengths. Don't worry about your weaknesses, right? Delegate those, work on your strengths, do what works for you. And I never really thought of that before. And I thought, wow, that was really quite powerful.
Yeah.
But as I read them, I'm reading through, I'm like, well, I'll probably be this, this, and this. None of the ones that I picked for myself that I thought were going to be my strengths were even it.
Really?
None of them. Not a single one came up. And my top 5, 4 of them were all strategic based. So intellection, ideation, input, learner are all these big, heavy strategic thinking. Learner, of course, is, that describes me to a T. And then competition. And I thought, what's this crap? And then immediately start reading into them. I'm like, well, this is me. I thought, holy cow, like it is right. I think long-term. I hate short-term answers. I know that short-term problem solving is necessary to put fires out. I want to solve it for the long term. I don't want to come back and have to solve this problem again.
Yeah.
So, go to Mr. Level. I start reading traction again. Why is there this unique ability thing? So I order unique ability and I start to take it. And unique ability it's very eye-opening. You have to be very open to feedback. Part of it is an internal thing and part of it is an external.
Yeah.
You send out some information to people and they have to respond. And they end up marrying up. And part of what the internal is you take the Colby A, right? So I'm all excited. You have to take Clifton too, but I'd already done that. So I did the Colby and I wasn't super surprised when I got on some of them, but when I got the systemize and process part of it, I thought, this is who I am. And you start to think of it in the greater picture of my strengths and how I operate. And it had a huge impact on me becoming and doing what I'm doing now because I quit worrying about the things that I'm not, right? And I talk to people that are very high quick start, right? The owner of Mr. Level was, I would assume, is probably a very high quick start, right? I'm just not afraid of anything. I'm not afraid of failure, but I'm going to ensure my success. And so I also understand that part of that where I ensure my success, I'm very slow to act. And so I actively have to say, I'll meet you in the middle, right? Because that's where our relationship is. Okay, I'm going to get out of my comfort zone by acting a little bit faster with the fact that I know it won't necessarily work out, or I may have to tweak it later for the long-term solution.
Yeah.
And so going through this whole unique ability thing and realizing that process and facilitation and teams, right? All the way back to this Marine Corps teamwork and all these things. Like that's where I grew my greatest joy, was working with all these people, being in front of that crowd, doing that public speaking or whatever it was, drawing those answers out and really coming up with a beautiful long-term solution or process that everybody can just kind of put to work, right? It was a highly enjoyable process, and I would, anybody is trying to struggle with like where your path is.
Yeah.
I would highly suggest unique ability and doing that Clifton, doing that Colby, reaching out and being vulnerable to those people that are around you, and figuring out where that unique ability lies. And it's just like, there's no wrong answers. It's just, what's your unique ability? And then just like with anything else, you have to apply it, right?
Right.
So
only half the equation. If you know, now it's, what are you going to do with it?
Classic low quick start, right? What do? I overthink Delta business strategies, right? But I had some experience with doing what I like to do. I mean, I've done it multiple times, but overthink the whole other side of it. Like, how do you start a business? How do you do all this stuff? But knowing that, you know what, dummy, just jump in, just do it. Just quit overthinking. I said to I think one of the comments I made to you this morning is that I overthought the whole process of this. Completely changed my life. I always thought of myself as being a business owner one day, but I could never think of what. Like I overthought it.
Right.
And
you're thinking about a product or there's so many different ways you could go with it, right? But
yeah. And how would I go about doing it? And well, this person was already doing it, so why would I start that business? And then here it is, right? It's, well, now this makes sense because this is what I like doing. And it helps other people, right? When I see their faces light up because they have a realization that they just made their business better, I get a charge out of it. I walk out of it going, I did something cool.
Yeah.
I did something cool.
That fits your unique ability. There's kind of the balance of humble confidence. And some people could use an extra dose of humility for sure. Others can use a little boost in confidence because that, if you have too much of one or the other, you're either going to be arrogant and turn people off, or you're not going to recognize and kind of promote yourself and put yourself in position to share your unique ability with others. Like I've not gone through Dan Sullivan's program yet. Our founder here and other team members have, so I've had some exposure to it. Certainly with Colby, it too prompted a change in my own life. It was that reaffirmation, that validation that you knew these things, but you couldn't clearly articulate or identify them, and there was always uncertainty in path. But this made it clear as day, this is where I will offer most value and get most energy from, is if I can tap into these things. And boy, how many of us, how often have we operated where we knew with certainty, how we were perceived, or we knew something that when we asked, we found out we were totally off the mark? If we don't ask, if you don't have that process then of validating, confirming with others, you can be really narrow-minded and confused, upset, just pissed off when people don't respond the way that you want them to, or you think that they should, right? Like, that's such a critical recurring step for leaders to take, is like level up their self-awareness through critical feedback seeking. And you, Michael Cantor, who was a guest on one of our episodes, and a couple other folks have now mentioned unique ability and having gone through that process. And then it sounds like that was one of the factors that prompted you in the step to establish Delta Business Strategies, right? And listeners, I mean, something unique about the timing of this conversation. It's like, you're established, you're formed, you're working with clients, but it is a relatively new venture. We're still early phases.
Oh, yeah.
Where I think that's exciting because, there's clearly value that you offer. You've identified ways that you can serve others that you love, and you're leaning into it, right? There's also that I want to kind of follow you as you go. I'm sure others may feel the same, whether there's opportunity right now to do some business together, or just, if they're like, oh, he seems like a good human and want to see him do well. It's an exciting time. And whenever I see somebody make that step, it's like, I want to high five the hell out of them, because that's scary. And I'm 9 quick start. It's still scary for me, right?
Oh, yeah.
I joined forces with a team who had already established, rather than doing something that you did. So that's a hell of a storm. Was there anything outside of this awareness, the systems and tools that you'd now been exposed to and kind of made your own, that gave you that courage to leap?
Certainly, the support of my family. My wife is not, she's very risk averse, but she is supporting me in the effort. There's, it's, back to that Marine mentality where, it'll be fine, right? Like, just, it's gonna suck. I even said this to my wife the other day. I said, for the first couple months are probably going to suck. And I said, but I think it's going to work. I said, I think that I can help people make their organization better. And I think that the people will see value in that. I mean, time is something that you can't get back. And if I can help somebody with that help of time, and my building and documenting and improvising those processes where you and your employees don't have to do it, I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. But there's a lot of times, I mean, I texted my buddy this morning and I said, getting scary.
Yeah.
And it didn't stop me. I mean, I knew that I had to do it. I knew that it was always a dream of mine to do it. You have to take a risk. You have to, sometimes you just got to put your head down into the storm, and you got to get after it. And if you can't have any regrets. I've had enough regrets in my life, where I wanted to do something and I just didn't have the guts to go after it. Certainly some of them worked out, and all the ones I didn't try, of course, didn't work. I sit back and I go, dang, like, that sucks, and certainly as you get older, right? One of the things that kind of prompted me is I just turned 50 the other day. Well, not a couple months ago. And I thought, very strange how the age changes you. And I I went from this point of like being more aware of other people, what they thought of me or what they thought I should do, to really just going, time's running out. Like, get off your ass and go get it done.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, guess what? It'll be fine. You can go get a job, right? Whatever. Just go do it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And
from an altruistic place too. Like, I think that it's not just for you, the betterment of the family and the well-being. Like you offer value, Darby. Like there is something you can help people. Something that gets me out of bed in the morning, right? Or just like pumps me up is recognizing that when you make a change, when you go through a workshop, there's a cascading effect, right? Not just like the compounding effect of how many times this 1 minute addition costs the company over time, but kind of the inversion of that with, if I can help here, how many other lives, how many other people, how does that contribute to a better culture, a better dynamic? How many leaders does that free up to focus on the things that really do matter most, where they're most uniquely needed and hopefully skilled in? There's that side too that I'm sure fuels you.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of I just call them soft effects that happen when all these things line up, right? Morale improves, buy-in improves, people feel better about their leader or their manager because now they're investing, right? They just see that they're investing time in the company. And so that it has, building that process has more of an effect than just building the process. It has that cultural metamorphosis in the company where people begin to flourish, right? They just go, cool, let's go.
For sure. Well, when we sat in the room for the first time, I was like, all right, we're getting you on the podcast because we're advocates for you. We've lived it. We've experienced it. Even if, many more are to come, happy to celebrate that because of how you helped us. And I'll be cheering you on from the sidelines, helping however we can. I imagine you're doing a lot of the things just based on who you are to set yourself up for success. You got a VTO.
Yeah. Yep.
Right?
I just reviewed
EOS?
it last night.
All right. Just to give you that clarity, you're a far higher follow through than I am with an 8. So I imagine sticking to it, having your own system and process, setting yourself up for success there. If we pique the curiosity of somebody or something that we discussed today resonated and they're like, shit, maybe now is the time. Maybe I should at least have a conversation with this guy, or they just want to follow you in your journey as well because they're curious and are going to judge your success as a factor in whether they should also take that entrepreneurial leap, right? Now there's a lot on the line here. We're building it up, Darby, but they can get in touch with you on LinkedIn.
Yep.
Darby Walsh.
Darby Walsh at LinkedIn.
And there's a business page for Delta Business Strategies.
Yep.
Website is
deltabusinessstrategies.com.
All right. I'm sure you're open to pick your brain sort of conversations, but do you have a process for how they could start the process should they want to?
Yeah. I mean, it's contact. It's just get a hold of me. Let me know that you're interested. We started off with just a quick phone call, just get to know each other. I like to then use that phone call to set up a face-to-face meeting. There's so much more to be had with so we'll just, do a little face-to-face discovery. We'll talk about where you're at, where the organization is at. If you're, hey, listen, we're ready for explosive growth, or we're ready to grow, or we need some help, we have a problem, just kind of determine where you lie there, and just agree on some times and dates and how we're going to proceed.
Sure. And this could be, you said, small to mid-sized companies that are readying for growth or plateaued, right? Maybe they have potential for growth.
Yeah.
But they've been stagnant because they're too involved in it and don't have these well-formed processes. What about geography? Where would you say is most relevant service if you're a business in Northeast Ohio
So right now, yeah, I mean, right now it's Northeast Ohio. I am not opposed to travel. I'm not opposed to going really, I mean, anywhere.
Sure.
I mean, I love to see new places and do new things. But yeah, primarily right here in Northeast Ohio or Ohio.
Sure.
But I'm Pennsylvania, Indiana, Michigan. I don't really care really. As long as we can work out some details.
Right.
And my wife doesn't get too mad. My kids are all teenagers, so, as long as they put a nice plate of food in front of them.
Yeah. They'll be happy.
Well, they're happy, right? So I can get away for a couple of days. I would say that, that it is an investment though, right? It's not, it's probably at the bare minimum, a week, that we're talking, right? Because, it's mapping this big overall process. It's then diving into these smaller processes, right? The bigger the company, the more things you're going to have going on. And so it is an investment, but it's an investment that will pay off as your foundation, as you strengthen the foundation of your company.
For sure. Are you talking like a week straight generally?
Yeah. So, and I think that was one of the things that, so when you and Pete and Liz and I met, we kind of had to break some things up because of some time constraints with scheduling. It makes it a little difficult to do that. It's not impossible. One of those Marine things like Semper Gumby is our secondary motto, always flexible. Right. And so I'm not afraid of mixing things up or whatever. But for continuity's sake, the more time we can string together is better. But certainly it becomes, working with some teams here and there, then me doing some documentation and then back and forth. It's not like I'm going to come in and take the team's whole week time period. Right? It's going to be just doing some observations and then doing some testing, right? So part of what that step is that once you kind of have everything written, you got to confirm that that's that we have it right, and making sure that the teams are all aligned with how it goes. So the time constraints are going to be customized to your business.
Yeah. That makes sense.
But it's a commitment for sure.
I know when we went through it, I mean, there was also flexibility in like how the processes were documented. And that was one thing I know we didn't touch on too much, but I thought it makes sense to call out is that you can do it a number of different ways. We personally benefited from Loom and BombBomb and these other screen record features that to be able to quickly talk through something and then show it step by step, especially in some of the more granular procedures and sub-processes and things. Crazy helpful. You seem to say, each business is different, each process is different. The tool or method, there was flexibility there.
There's different ways of recording, right? So we can, if you want to put them all in a Word document and have a big pile of paper, right, which is probably unlikely. But if you want to do it that way, we can do it that way. If you want, if you want to use some of these other digital platforms, we can plug everything into the digital platform and it's there for, as long as the servers are running.
Right. And I'm sure you'll continue to see successes and downfalls of each to be the aggregate of what people are using and what works best, so you can form recommendations too.
Yeah, and that's just it, right? That's that whole flexibility thing, right? It's how you want to run your business. I'm just going to facilitate drawing that out of the team, getting it into common practice, followed by all, right? And then we'll work to simplify. We'll work to make sure that it's there as a tool for you to use and for your managers to use day in and day out.
We're all about help first. If there's one or two things that anyone who listened to this could go do that you think would help them with their own processes, maybe a first step, something that they could do even if you disconnect yourself from it and just say somebody who loves process and wants to see people succeed, what would one or two things be that they could do to take that first step? And whether it be awareness, whether it be refinement, I don't know. Well, what's something that you think would be helpful?
So certainly the first step is awareness, right? You have to strip out the emotion, strip out the ego, right? And say, this is something that will make us come into it with an open mind. Know that your employees will probably tell you that something that you've told them to do is not best. It may be effective, but not efficient. You have to be vulnerable. You gotta strip out that and be ready to learn some things about yourself and about your company, and then embrace it and put it to work. And as you know, we've all seen that person that's, wants to exhibit some sort of bias and they stand in the way of progress. You're just going to hurt yourself.
Sure.
Right. And so be vulnerable, to be ready to embrace it, and then hang on, because, I'm sure, people that are running EOS and everything, like, as that catches hold in the culture, people love it. They love when there's structure.
No doubt.
Right. They love structure, and it's not confining structure. It's
the guardrails to be free and have autonomy, right? Yeah. That, there's a cliff there that is probably going to be a core value issue, or a cliff there that is going to cost us money and customer and be violation of brand. But is that fair?
No, absolutely. Absolutely right.
That freedom to run in between, the autonomy, that you can empower people with is huge. Yeah. Anything that I got one or two more for you, and then we're going to wrap this thing. So,
okay.
Anything you know today that you wish you knew 10, 20 years ago, that through your own continuous improvement, through this stage in your career, you would go back and tell yourself that would make you a more effective leader, stronger at forming process?
The only thing that I would tell myself would be to drop the ego. I've as a lifelong learner, I've focused a lot of that learning inward in the last couple of years, right? I thought that the degree was important, and I thought that the title was important, and I thought that the money was important. And as I've become more comfortable with who I am, and these assessments have helped me see who I am, and strip that ego away. Certainly I still struggle with it, right?
We all have it.
As I've been more aware and better at doing that, I've become a better person. And I work at it every day. I struggle with it every day. But that's what I would tell myself. I would just say, quit being an ass, and kind of let it flow a little.
Are you going to share this with your kids? Are they going to make fun of you or give you a hard time about one or two things you did or said, or do you think they're going to?
I've got 4 kids. They've made it a contact sport out of making fun of dad. And there's no, I don't even have a safe zone. So part of that vulnerability is being vulnerable with your family. Knowing that, when they're making fun of you, they're doing it from a position of love and admiration. And, so yeah, absolutely. I try not to lose my temper.
Right.
Sometimes Marine guy comes out the woodwork. But yeah, absolutely. Share it all.
I've got a almost 5, almost 2 or almost 3-year-old, and then another one coming. And I have thought, like, I think I'm going to see this one day. And it's like, surely they'll make fun of you. They'll make fun of me. But there's also a legacy piece of, kind of speaking openly, speaking honestly. It's from the heart that hopefully, inspires them as well.
I try to live my life by, I like to sleep. And if I can get to bed, and know that I've done a good job, and served better than what I demanded. Than I usually sleep pretty. And so sleeping at night is kind of my gauge. If I didn't sleep at night, I go back and I go, what'd you do wrong?
It's a good barometer.
Yeah. And then I go, well, I'm not doing that again. That was pretty dumb.
I was hoping you were going to say a quarter mile at a time, but I actually like what you said much more, and it was more heartfelt. There's the Vin Diesel from Fast and Furious says, I live my life a quarter mile at a time. So whenever I hear somebody say I live my life, I'm like, but that hits with me. It's weird to think of, it's not running from things that you'll regret, right? But it's also being aware of, kind of that look back. Do you feel good about the decisions you made?
Yeah.
Who you are, who you impacted, and did you put more out into the world than you took?
Yeah.
So,
and I don't care if it's just driving down the road and, not getting angry at the person that cut you off, or, did I give it my all at work today? Or, was I listening when my son was telling me, some story that, right? As he drones on about a million details that have nothing to do with the final ending of the story, but, did you do it right? Do you not have any regrets about the way you did it?
For sure. If you're present, if you're in the moment, you can at least acknowledge that and get a little better tomorrow. Incremental progress.
Yeah, for sure.
Any last thing you want to share with any listeners today about process, about Delta business strategy, machine guns, fatherhood? I don't know. Anything else you want to share before we wrap?
Oh, I want to talk about machine guns. We'll double this podcast.
Well, I turned the volume up to 12 and I've been yelling the whole time to make sure you could hear me after that stint. But,
I just want to say thank you. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity. It's, life's a journey, and this is something that I never, I told you this at the beginning, I never thought that I would ever be in this position, being on a podcast, talking about something I think I know a little bit about.
yeah.
But it's been fun, and I appreciate the opportunity.
For sure. Wouldn't have had you on if we didn't believe in you. I think it's often not what you know, but knowing the right questions to ask. You asked some really good questions. So help Darby and Delta Business Strategies grow, help your team get more out of their business and their time by forming better processes. Give this guy a shout, or just pick his brain, right? And have some conversation about these things. Thanks as always for listening today. Hope you stayed to the end and got this portion as well and didn't just fast forward. If you did, drop me a comment or send us a direct message, and I'll send you some Buffalo swag or something special, all right? But folks, as always, thank you much. Charge into the storm.